All right, good afternoon, everyone. I know that we are all hungry, not for wisdom, but literally hungry. I'm hungry as well, right? So, what I'm going to do for this particular session is that while I was sitting there, I kind of changed my strategy a little bit. I know that you've been sitting here for quite some time, a lot of heavy but very, very insightful stuff we had to digest since morning. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to flip my talk a little bit. So instead of talking about how do you use FOSS to build products, I'm actually going to talk about what you should not do when you're building products, right? Because there's a lot of conversation out there about what are the methods or the processes ideal for building solutions. But just something to remember is that it's only like 1% of projects that make it to the news, right? So there's this bias that we all have that every project is successful. And I think very little is spoken about stuff that began but never saw the light of day. And I want to bring about a little bit of personal experience, as I speak about that. So you can't begin a session without Drake, right? What I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk about a little bit of personal experience. I've been an entrepreneur for quite some time. One of the reasons why I've been chatting up with all the volunteers is because I started my first company when I was in college, right? And I was also an organizer for events like this. So I kind of know what's happening out there in the chaos, when they have to also organize lunch and we are running out of time. So I empathize with all of that. So I learned a lot of lessons the hard way. I didn't have a lot of people, sort of guiding me about what is right and what is wrong. But right now, I specialize in social innovation, and I work a lot with the UN. I've worked with some of the top brands in the world. I also own and run 2 companies, which I will talk about towards the end. But what I just want you to remember is everything that I'll be speaking about here today is drawn from personal experience, right? So I'm going to keep it as anecdotal as possible. So you get a little bit of insight of what my journey has been like. And I owe a lot of it to open source because I've been using open source tools. I was a part of the Mozilla community back in the day. So I kind of owe a lot of things to this community. So this is me paying back to like my younger self if I got a chance to speak to you. So that's why I'm here today. Okay. Now, when I talk about projects I've worked on, and I'm very happy to speak about all of these projects during lunch. But a couple of examples that I want to give you of just open source tools and methods and innovations that I've been using. For example, some of the methods I'll be sharing with you, my team has been using it to combat malaria in Mozambique. That's my team out there on the ground, where we use a lot of tools that this community works with to build a rapid diagnostic system, right? I've also been involved in projects which literally make agriculture cool. Let me ask you this question. Anybody here wants to become a farmer? Anyone here wants to be a farmer? Like that's your life's goal? Yeah, you do? But do you want to be a farmer? Is that something you've told your parents? कि पढ़ाई कर रहा है farmer बनने के लिए? That is awesome. Have you told your parents? No, right? It's not ideally something you speak about at home because nobody wants to be a farmer. You want to work in agri-tech, but no one really wants to get into agriculture, which is a problem around the world, not just in India, but also in a lot of other developing countries, where the youth is trying to get out of agriculture and not into agriculture, right? Agriculture is not cool. Your parents are not going to be happy if you tell them that you're coming to college to go and become a farmer. But what we've been trying to do is, we've been trying to set up a lot of open innovation labs. In fact, we run our own school of sustainable innovations in Kenya. That's right there from our school, where we are working with farmers on the ground, and we're seeing if we can bring students and researchers to develop open source innovations that can help solve problems that some of these farmers face. So it's farmer owned but student driven, a lot of these innovations. Also, I've been working on HPV prevention and cancer care. In fact, that's something that has taken up like the last 2 years of my life. HPV vaccines are very popular now, right? Of course, after the recent government promotions about getting the vaccine. You should get it if you haven't. But I've also been involved in working with patients and doctors on the ground, seeing if we can track the spread of HPV and seeing if we can design patient-centric innovations to stop the spread and also to look at cancer care. And of course, I've also been working with slum refugees. So that's me in Egypt back in 2019, where again, a lot of methods that I'll be talking about were used to design solutions on the ground. And we always try to see if we can document how we go about doing some of this work and make as much of our tools and research and processes and methods available to people so that they can also benefit from it, right? My whole purpose of doing this is to give you a background of where I'm coming from. I'm a field person, but I'm also an engineer. So I used to be a developer. I built a company and then moved to the field. And what I constantly realize is that developers do not think about, as Max said, the people on the other side of your app, right? Because we are so engrossed with what stack we are going to use, what's the latest out there, and we are doing a lot of things for vanity. Not all of us, some of us doing a lot of things for vanity and thinking very little about what happens when you are no longer in control of your release or your app. What happens once it's out there in the field and real people are using it? There are things to account for which you will never find out in your classrooms. So it's very important that you start thinking about the other side, which is mainly your user base, right? And that's what I'm trying to go to do here today. Bridge the gap between you as developers and how do you really think about problems and apply your skills to solving real problems for real people. It's very different from what it seems like when you're sitting in your classrooms, right? And I know that because I was in those classrooms myself. So yeah, basically been doing this for the last couple of years around the world. Now, in order to help you get some of these insights, what I want to do is I'm going to keep this a little personal, right? So I'm going to back it up to the origin of how I started doing the kind of work I do right now. And I'm going to talk about a few things which might seem very weird for a FOSS conference, but I want you guys to bear with me, and I'm going to help you connect the dots. Now, I grew up in this extremely small town in the northeast of India. I wish I could say nice ringtone, but it's not. Yeah. So I grew up in this very, very small town, right there on the map, like very close to Nepal, Bhutan, and India's border with China. I'm a Pahadi, as you would say. Please do not post pictures of Maggie in the mountains. It makes no sense to me. That's not what we do. But I grew up there, right? Now, this geographical context is very important because the place that I grew up in is so remote that it's mainly known for the Himalayas and the TS states, right? But it is also known as an elephant corridor. That's what traffic looks like back where my mom stays, right? And I've actually, still better than Bangalore, right? This is manageable. But I've in fact I've spoken at TEDx about this particular phenomenon that happens there, which I will not speak about here, which is basically there's this weird thing that happens there where elephants get drunk. Literally, I'm not making this up, right? Elephants get drunk in that area. Of course, elephants don't manufacture alcohol. It's on human alcohol that they get drunk. And it's bizarre. If you want to know more about that, you can just go ahead. You can ask me for the link, or you can just go to my website. Now, here is why I'm talking about all of this, right? So you can imagine a place that is remote. Now, this place was so remote that the first pizza outlet opened in 2020, right? In the pandemic, somebody had an idea कि ये area को pizza खिलाना चाहिए, right? So my mom was very happy. She said that Pizza Hut opened up here, but it turned out to be Pizza Home, right? It's a knockoff, not Pizza Hut. But interestingly, internet was available in that area in 1999, which I always found very interesting growing up, right? Do you guys know about cyber cafes? Has anybody gone to cyber cafes, right? So the first cyber cafe in the region opened up in 1999. I don't know if you guys know about this, but India had a public policy that introduced internet using MTNL in 1997, which is a very big deal because we're a very young country, right? It's not even been 80 years since our independence. So for a young country to think about introducing internet in a country that vast, which also reached up my place, is just bizarre, right? But there was internet in my area. And what I kind of realized as a means of that, and this was the only cyber cafe, by the way, in like a 50-kilometer radius, right? Literally like one of those memes where you cross a river to go to school, you cross a river to go to the cyber cafe. But here is how it's interesting. I kind of realized in life that internet is more important than pizza. Here is what I mean. Because our region had access to the internet, we had open access to resources that would never have been available in a region so remote, right? Never. And because we had access to resources, we had access to the same opportunities, the same information, the same resources as somebody sitting in the Silicon Valley. And that was a big game changer, right? Like my cousin is a researcher at Stanford University. That's impossible for a region like that, but that was possible because we had internet very, very early, right? Even before pizza, which came up like 4 years ago. And that kind of taught me a very important lesson in life, which is if you are able to give the right tools, open tools to a community, and you can teach them how to use it. Because back in the day in the cyber cafe, you had a person who would also teach you how to browse the internet. Nobody there knows how to browse the internet, right? So think about it for a perspective. As a developer, you're going to make the UI and the UX, but your users have never seen an app or a concept like the internet before. They have no idea how to use it. So there is somebody sitting there. As a developer, you'll never know this person in a cyber cafe who's actually sitting and teaching other people how to use your UI, right? Which will never come into account when you're really planning for these things. And I saw that firsthand. So that kind of led me to really having this sort of philosophy in life, which I just shared. You really can help communities transcend their boundaries, transcend their limitations, and help them solve their own problems by giving them access to open tools, right? And that kind of became like a catchphrase that I started using, which also, if you think about it, is very aligned with the open source philosophy, right? Giving open tools, open methods, documenting it well, knowledge workers like Mac and the community actually supporting it is so important because now it doesn't matter where you are. You don't really need a teacher. You can learn if you have access to tools. And that's a concept I sort of carried forward in my life. But I want you guys to remember this entire thing, right? Internet is greater than pizza, because I realized that something was missing here, and I'll tell you what that is. So when I was in college, as I said, that's me in college. Nobody needs 2 laptops. Which one? Good stuff. I would win like a 10-year challenge any day. This one, the one in the front, the weird one, right? Typical boys' dorm room. Nobody needs 2 laptops. Nobody has 2 laptops in college. This is only for a photograph. Like I borrowed my roommate's laptop so it looks cool, right? I look like a developer, right? Kind of looks like I'm doing serious stuff. I'm like, nobody works like that, to be honest. But this picture is interesting because this was a picture of me and my team when we had already built our first company. I was 19 years old. I had no idea how to run a startup or even build products back then. And I was working on the same concept of giving open source tools and also teaching people how to use it so they can solve problems. I made a couple of mistakes. But before that, everything that I'm talking about here, like I said, is advice I would have given to my younger self. So all advice is autobiographical. It's a quote I love from this guy called Austin Kleon, who is a writer and an artist. And what really happened when I was doing that is that I was a FOSS contributor. I built my startup, built a team, had an office space. I had an investor, early potential users, and I thought I was doing very well in life. I thought there would be a movie made on me someday, right? I told my parents at home, don't worry, I'm all set, right? There's a movie going to be made on me someday, doing well in life. As a 19-year-old, it gets to your head, right? But here is what happened. Any guesses? Yeah, of course. I failed, right? Oh, by the way, there's me having an event at my college launching my startup. I hope you recognize me by now. This guy. This weird guy is me, right? Now, here's what happened. 2 years of running the company, bunch of us, in spite of having checked all the boxes in the entrepreneurship and product building playbook. Of course, I didn't have someone like Mac to tell me where I went wrong back then, but we failed. And we failed spectacularly. Didn't just fail. Like we failed like in a way that we became an example of like, this is what you're not supposed to do, right? Which is why now I give talks like this. But let me ask you this question, guys. What is like the worst phone call you've ever had in your life? Worst. Horrible. You don't want to relive that moment anymore. What's the worst phone call? You're so morbid. As the anchor of this event talking about death, sitting in the first row. But fair enough. That's a bad call. Anyone else? What's the worst phone call? Breakup, of course. That's why you want to be a farmer. Sorry?
My call with RMS, international call for 40 minutes.
Your call with RMS, it's an international call for 40 minutes. It's like a podcast, right? Like you can just listen to it at like 2x speed. That's what you feel like. I'll tell you what my worst phone call was. I had to tell my team that we have to shut down the company. And I didn't just have to tell my team. My team consisted of students. In fact, I had a team member that had dropped out of college to work at my company. I didn't drop out of college. He did. So don't drop out of college is basically what I'm trying to say. Makes no sense. You're not Steve Jobs. This is not the US, right? Don't be stupid. But I had to have a call with their parents, explaining to them why I'm not going to be able to have an office space for them anymore. And ever since that day, I'm scared of moms. I can't tell you what the phone calls were like with the mothers I was speaking to, trying to explain why I messed their sons' lives up and daughters' lives up. But it was terrible, right? And of course, there's no movie made on me, obviously. Not yet. Now, here's the point. I always start with my story of failure before I talk about all the success, which you can Google for me and read. I know it sounds obnoxious, but I don't want to waste time talking about successes because nobody talks about these things, right? What it really feels like out there when you're doing it, like beyond all the concepts and beyond all the theories. I walked away with some pretty important lessons, which ties back into the FOSS mindset. So, a couple of lessons just for all of you, really, really quick. First of all, please do not build a product in search of a problem. This is typical rookie mistake a first-time product builder or an entrepreneur makes, where you're so excited about the technology that you just build something and then you try to see who's going to buy it. Please do not do that, right? You're building products for real people. If you're building it for yourself, that is great. If it's a hobby project, that's okay. But in general, if you're getting into product building or entrepreneurship, understand problems before you jump into building solutions or products, right? Do not build products in search of a problem. Lesson number 2, we have this bias where we tend to feel like there's a lot of things that we want to put into our product because we care about them so much. But please understand that your users may not really care about all of those things, right? It is a little sad, but our end consumers don't care about whether you made the product using FOSS or not, right? They don't. It doesn't make a difference. Let me ask you this question. Netflix. How many of you here know the tech stack of Netflix? The entire tech stack of Netflix. Anyone here knows it? Of course. You use it every day. You don't care about what they're using, right, to build the product. That's the consumer mindset. Nobody cares about whether you build it using open source or not. But building products using open source technologies is a benefit that you have as a developers. That's on you, right? And that's amazing. But you have to understand that your consumers care about their problems getting solved and not what technology you're using to solve that problem. Also, not going to talk about this because Mac already has. In a startup, your culture is everything. Not strategies, not fundraising, not your marketing, not even the product that you're building. It's the culture you have internally as a team, which brings me to the last point, which, one sec, let me hide this, which is, please, if you're picking a team for anything, including organizing an event like this, pick a team that you can pick a fight with. If you're not able to honestly tell a team member, when they're messing up and still put together a great product or a great company or a great event, you have the wrong team member, right? You have to be able to speak to them as honestly as possible and vice versa and still be aligned with the mission of what you're doing. But all of these things, if I kind of summarize, and if I go back to the stuff that I had started with, the realization that I had is that internet is greater than pizza. That's great, but they're both incomplete without people, You don't have anybody to share a pizza with. If you were the only person on the internet, it makes absolutely no sense for you to be there. So when you're building products, when you're talking about digital tools, when you're talking about open source, open innovation, it's not just about commits. It's not just about tech stacks. It's not just about pushing your code live. It's about the real people, both internally within your team and externally, which is the people that you're building for. And it's very important that you always take them into account, right? But also, you guys with me so far? Yeah? Sounds good? Okay. Now the point is, how do you find problems worth solving? Or how do you even know if you're solving the right problem? It's a very important question to ask that doesn't get asked very often. And I want to slightly move into a new direction, which is right now, of course, this also ties in with open source for social innovation, which is what I specialize in. A lot of work that I do now, that my team does now, is working with very remote communities in developing countries, right? I've worked in about 12, 13 countries so far, very remote areas, both in Southeast Asia and in Africa. I want to share an anecdote of something that my team realized a couple of years back, right? So we were working in a very remote region in Africa, in Kenya, and there was an observation that we made, which is no matter where we went, we always found a Coca-Cola product, right? No matter where we went. And these were places where you didn't have internet connection, you sometimes didn't have proper 24 hours electricity, but you always found somebody selling Coca-Cola, right? Either on a bike or at the back of the truck, or there was a small shop. And we found that very interesting because we were like, if basic services does not reach these regions, how is Coca-Cola selling their products in the same places? And we became very interested in this, right? So when we started doing some research, we found that we were not the only ones who had noticed this. In fact, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which works on delivering life-saving medicines and aid and vaccines in Africa, they also realized the same thing, right? So Gates Foundation realized that they are not able to deliver medicines to region where Coca-Cola is already selling its products. And they found that super interesting, which actually led to this project, which I find very interesting, called Project Last Mile, right? Which asks the question, if you can get a Coca-Cola product anywhere in the world, why can't you also get medicines in the same places? So basically what happened is, Gates Foundation collaborated with Coca-Cola to use their supply chain system to deliver life-saving medicines and vaccines, right? If you think about it for a moment, take a step back and think about what just happened. Coca-Cola is an FMCG beverage company, right? Gates Foundation is working on a healthcare project. They have nothing to do with each other. But Gates Foundation was able to find a solution to their problem by learning from Coca-Cola's supply chain expertise and by collaborating with them. Why this is so important is because when you're participating in hackathons in college, again, bringing the context back, Coca-Cola is doing well, but what about us? When you're participating in hackathons in college or when you're building products, for whatever reason, sometimes when you know what problem you're solving, we have a bias to only look for inspiration or ask questions within our sector, right? If you're building a healthcare app, we only look at healthcare case studies, right? We only look at healthcare research. But true inspiration comes from outside your sector as well. In fact, some of the most cutting edge innovations have happened because of collaborations outside the sector, right? So just remember that as a concept when you're building products. Now, having said that, we're talking about whether you're solving the right problem or not. And I know that I'm using the word building products so much, but just something for you to remember is that in the context of real world problems, products are not solutions. They are a part of the solution. Very important. Just like the cyber cafe wala, who was teaching, the people there how to use the Internet Explorer and Netscape, which was back then. So that person is not a part of the product, but that person is a part of the solution. When you're building products, you are limited to thinking only about the app that you're building or the hardware prototype that you're building or whatever. But I would really encourage you guys to think as solution designers and not just product designers, because solving a problem requires much more than just building a product. Product is a very important part of the solution, no doubt. It's the core of your solution, but it's not the solution itself. I want to demonstrate a very, very quick point here, just to bring this home. I'm going to give you a context behind this picture. I know there are no laptops here, but that's fine. I want to show you how complicated these things are in the field. So for context, this project was called Play Pumps, right? It's a real project. Play Pumps was basically designed as a solution to communities that did not have access to water. There was no tap water in these communities, right? Now, it was found that these communities, for some reason, also did not have playgrounds for children. Not a causation, just a correlation, right? Communities without access to water, tap water, also did not have access to playgrounds for children. So a bunch of designers came up with this brilliant solution where you have a merry-go-round, and when the merry-go-round spins, it pumps water to the water tank that you see behind, right there, right? And then a small community now gets access to tap water. Pretty awesome, right? Kids have something to play with, and you also now have access to tap water. Awesome. This project was actually celebrated by everyone around the world. World leaders endorsed it, celebrities endorsed it. It received rockstar funding. But here's the twist in the story. This project is now studied as what you're not supposed to do when you're building solutions. Here is why. There is a design flaw in this project, right? And I chose this example on purpose to help you take a step back from what you're always used to and do some critical thinking. There is a design flaw in this solution that nobody saw until it was actually implemented in the field, and they realized that the design flaw makes this product something that should not exist out there. Question for all of you. Can you guess what the design flaw was?
It can be used to extract some other fuels other than water.
It can be used to extract something else other than water. Are you thinking of oil? I feel like you're thinking of oil, but fair. Fair. Anyone else? What's your name? Soham, thank you. Anyone else?
Kids aren't powerful enough.
Yeah.
They don't play 24/7.
Sure. Fair.
It's not enough water.
Okay, so kids are not powerful enough. What's your name? Venkat, thank you. So kids are not powerful enough. They don't play 24/7. You may not get water 24/7, right? Fair. Yes. If the water fills up and the kids are still playing, then there's going to be water wastage, right? Okay, pretty awesome. What's your name? Sorry? Vignesh. Thank you. Yes. Okay, Devi, what is your name? Darshan. All right. That's the right answer. So let me break it into context of what Darshan is trying to say. Take a step back for a minute and think about what's happening here, right? You have a bunch of kids. When they use or play on a merry-go-round, it pumps water, and then a community gets water, right? Which means that the children's labor on the merry-go-round is helping pump water and give access to a small community and helping solve their problem, which basically means that this is a project that incentivizes child labor, right? Nobody thought about that. By the way, you don't think about these things because it's not really concerning the product. The product is very well designed. It's only when you try to think about your users you realize what happens. By the way, this is a phenomenon that keeps repeating itself. I have been part of teams that have designed blockchain-based apps for like refugee camps without understanding what happens in a refugee camp, right? It doesn't matter how good your tech is. If you do not understand your users, you're sometimes going to end up creating a problem bigger than the one you're trying to solve, right? So in short, I'm going to skip this. I can talk about it later. What does all of this have to do with open source? Why are we talking about this in a FOSS meetup, right? Open source is extremely powerful, especially for solving complex social innovation scenarios. Because of this quote that I love, which is, many perspectives lead to better solutions. It's way better for you to work with a community, right? It's very hard. Like, for example, when I asked this question, because there were so many of you, there is a probability of 1 that somebody will get the answer and will understand what was wrong with that. Imagine if it was just you. You would be looking for oil, right? That's what happens, right? So many perspectives lead to better solutions, and that's why it's so powerful to really open source social innovation. By the way, when I speak about open source, I don't just mean software. It can be hardware, it can be business models, it can also be innovation models. For example, my company, we are trying to open source a lot of our innovation models. We already have. We also are creating programs so that we can teach it to other people, because we feel that the world's problems are way big for just one organization to like solve it by ourselves, right? Of course, these are the other stuff about open source that most of us already know about. But just two things for you to remember is that taking an open source approach means that help is always available. You get to run a project where you get help 24/7 because the open source community is all over the world. You get that for free, right? It's not just limited to your time zone. You have people around the world working to resolve some of the issues, and that's super, super powerful. And of course, errors are fixed much faster. Some of the biases are spotted like way, way faster. So in conclusion, what I've been trying to say is, I encourage you to think of yourselves as solution designers and not just product designers. Open source is something that everybody in this room is at least interested in or enthusiastic about. If not, you're contributing to it officially. It's a hard skill, and that's great. You have the most difficult part out of the way. You have a hard skill already. You're an engineer. You can create change, right? But what you should also start understanding is that open source, softwares, hardwares, all of that, they are tools, and tools are used to solve problems, right? Which is why you got to start also understanding how, for example, climate change can be solved using open source solutions, right? Or social justice, right? Or consider humanitarian aid, or even poverty, right? And if you notice, I didn't write it as open source for poverty. I wrote it as solving poverty using open source, because understanding the problem is more important before you can decide if open source is the right solution method for solving that problem or not, right? So just something very important to remember. And yeah, in closing, this is not pessimistic, the reason why I have this here. We literally just came out of a pandemic. We are in an era of climate change, right? We already have the ACs on, and it's still February. That's how hot it's getting. You have to understand that there are now more opportunities for you to solve problems than existed. The world is rapidly changing. Everybody in this room is at least an engineer or somebody capable of coding or making products, which is a great power. And as Ben Parker said to Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. You have the power to create products and create change, but it's also important for you to understand the problems that you're mapping those for. So yeah, best practices, a lot of best practices in this field are dead because the whole field changed after the pandemic. Consumers behave very differently now. Users behave very differently now. People prefer staying indoors. There's this whole conversation about this becoming the indoor generation, which is leading to its own health risks, right? So it's very important for you to start looking at what's next instead of just looking at what's best, right? And that's it. Thank you so much. You want to connect with me, scan the code, and happy to talk. Thank you. Yeah. The way you looked at me, I thought that I can't say anything like after like the last second.
I'm hungry.
I know, so am I. If you guys have any questions, by the way, I don't want to keep you here. I'm going to be around during lunch. Feel free to come up and speak to me. As you can see, I'm pretty chill about these things. So yeah, just feel free to have a conversation, yeah? And Mac, I need to pick your brain as well. Thank you. Thank you so much.